Good evening, everybody. It's Friday. It's 8:30 or 5:30 on the West Coast. That means it's time for Fearless Agility TV, coming to you from my social distancing bunker in an undisclosed location in North America, and not, as has been speculated, my girlfriend's basement. Hey, everybody. How you doing? So it's been a good week here at Fearless Agility. Got some super secret stuff going on. It's going to be announced shortly, so look here and on our website for an announcement on Tuesday. Some friends of mine and I are cooking up something special, but I can't talk about it just yet. He says forebodingly, or is it foreshadowingly? I guess it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to do what I always do at this time every week, which is clean up my parking lot from the last class or two. Don't have a lot of questions left in the hopper, so if you want to ask questions in the chat, feel free to do so. You can see it's just alive with activity right now. You might ask yourself, Jimmy, why do you do this? And I would say, well, other Jimmy, I got nothing else to do, right? We're all stuck inside, so let's do something potentially at least distracting. And also, hopefully, somebody gets something out of it. All right, let's go to the board and see what we got going on here. All right. One question I have. There we go. One question I have is, how do we as product owners, this is from Product Owner Workshop, know what piece of functionality will be delivered when? That's an interesting question, as they often are. I guess my first question would be, because it says this may be critical to provide an answer to management. Why? I guess I'd have to know more about why. I mean, obviously, if it's the kind of thing where you release more frequently than, say every quarter or every month, if you're doing real releases, like you need 3 months or something to build something that's actually releasable, then which piece is done when, I don't think matters. But if the question is, how do I know when something's going to get into production if I'm releasing more frequently than that? Well, as a product owner, you're going to decide. And you determine that so we need to remember that if we're doing Scrum, and if you've attended my workshops, you know this, and if you haven't, you probably don't. Scrum's an empirical process, so a piece of functionality or a feature or something like that is a solution to a problem. And in our product backlog, which is a list, we have the problems themselves. So the product owner gets to decide which problems are we going to talk about first and solve them in which order. So you roughly know what's happening right now and maybe next. Like in terms of long-range forecasting, I'm not sure why that's important, other than that's just what we've always done. But maybe you should think about it in a different way, right? Maybe you should think about it as, we'll deliver whatever is most needed first, what's needed next, and so on. And maybe don't get so hung up on sort of an output-focused approach to delivery. I would be more focused on outcomes, honestly. So I would have to know more about this question. If somebody watching wants to if this was your question, feel free to clarify in the chat. And otherwise, that's about all I have to say on that. So let's go back here and see. Should sprints not start on Mondays or Fridays? So it depends, right? Everything that we do should be predicated on the idea that we do what's best for the team and what do they say that they want and need. If a team feels that Monday and Fridays are high productivity, high energy days for them, I would question that. I'm not sure that's likely to be true, and there's some logistical problems. But I would, there's no prohibition. Whenever I see things with should and shouldn't, I caution people not to should all over themselves, because that, who's to say what should or shouldn't be? What I've observed in practice over 15 years is that Mondays and Fridays are typically not high productivity, high energy days. They are typically low productivity, low energy days. And why is that? Well, we, in most of the world, work on a 5-day work week that starts on Monday and ends on Friday. That gives us a 2-day weekend. Some parts of the world, they get a 3-day weekend. Some parts of the world, they get a 1-day weekend. But regardless, everybody has a period of time from 1 to 3 days where they're not working, and they're supposed to get away from work and stop thinking about it. And the context switch going from, hey, I was relaxing on my weekend, to I'm working, is non-trivial. It takes a little bit of time. So Monday mornings are usually just sort of people catching up on a bunch of emails and sort of cleaning their desks, and they might be, say, a little bit shagged out from the weekend, whatever plans they had. So maybe they're not. Also, at least in North America, the vast majority of holidays, federal holidays where people definitely aren't working, occur on Mondays and Fridays, and that can be disruptive. So my usual advice to teams is, start on a Tuesday or Wednesday and end 2 weeks later. There's no requirement to start it on any specific day or at any specific time. And I think there's also some anti-patterns that can emerge when you do Monday through Friday, because then it makes it feel more like a deadline or a deliverable or a milestone, which we should know it isn't, right? A sprint is just a timer. It's almost arbitrary. It's a period of time that's long enough for us to produce something useful and meaningful that stakeholders can then interact with and react to and tell us whether we're building the right thing or not, right? This is all about building the right thing. Somebody said once, might have been Michael James, agility is not about going fast. It's about the ability to steer. So I'd say it's an old school idea, doing it Monday to Friday. It could be harmful. You're probably going to lose more time. So maybe try different times, but try a Tuesday or a Wednesday. That'd be my advice. All right, let's take a look back at the board here. Oh, this is a good one. How can I convince management not to do Scrum? You might think that's a weird question for me as a sort of a Scrum evangelist to deal with. Here's the thing that's begun to happen over the last 5 or 6 years. 10 years ago, Scrum was allegedly relatively unproven. It wasn't widely known, and it was sort of, you had to convince people to do it. And then, for whatever reason, amongst all of the possible alternatives, it just blew up, and Scrum was the thing that you do, and everybody in technology and everybody in software is saying they're supposed to do it. I think that's natural, right? You get a shiny new toy, you want to try it everywhere. You want to try it on everything. Early in my Scrum training career and coaching career, I kind of dogmatically thought, you know what, I can use this on anything. Except for I tried. There's a bunch of stuff that it didn't work great on. So for things that it doesn't work great on, it's sort of silly and maybe even perverse to try and force fit it. I'll give you an example. One of my earliest organizations that I worked with was sort of a Web 2.0 company here in Portland, Oregon, where my home base is. And 80% of what they did was really just banner advertising, right? So you go to a website and there's like a banner or a float over or something like that, and it's trying to tempt you to click on it to click through to something that somebody wants to, monetize. It's like an ad. I tried to apply Scrum. They also did microsites, which is why I was involved. We were building little mini games, and that was a good use of Scrum. But I experimented with them with doing it with banner ads, and it was pretty boring. First of all, our sprints were a week long, and then there was only ever one backlog item, which is the as a media buyer, I want a banner ad that allows people to click through to my asset. So that's like backlog done, stories done, and then you put that on the board, and the tasks pretty trivial. Task number 1, graphic designer needs to come up with a graphic for the banner ad. Task number 2, the Swift developer, the Flash developer needs to put it into a Swift file, package it up, and send it to the media buyer. Step number 3, media buyer needs to okay it. So that's a pretty weird use of a sprint backlog, right? Like you got one PBI and 3 tasks. And then the daily scrums were hilarious because it would be like the 3 of us, there was 3 of us, right? And the media buyer wasn't usually available. It was me and the creative person who did the graphic design and the Flash developer. And it would be like, and I didn't say anything because I was sort of scrum master. And so the creative person will be like, well, yesterday I tried to come up with a cool idea for the banner ad, and today I'm going to do that some more, and my impediment is that I can't come up with a cool idea for the banner ad. And then the developers, and this really happened, so it's kind of hilarious now, but I didn't really know any better then. And then the developer says, well, yesterday I was waiting for so-and-so to come up with a cool ad and give me the graphic assets, and today it sounds like I'm going to be doing the same thing, and my impediment is that I'm waiting for the person to come up with it. And we did that for 4 days in a row, and then on the last day, at like 3:30 in the afternoon, the graphic designer finally came up with a picture, gave it to the developer. Developer put it in a Swift file, sent the Swift file to the media buyer. Media buyer okayed it, and it was done. And so all of that was a whole lot of extra words and process and everything else for something that we didn't need. So if you're doing something that you can solve on paper up front, Scrum's not the approach for that. Now, how do you convince management to do it? Well, maybe you have a conversation with them about why do you want people to do Scrum in the first place, right? There's all kinds of places where I wouldn't do it. And if you need some help in a specific situation, well, hit me up. I'm happy to help you out. You can post a question in the chat, or you can go to our website at fearlessagility.com. Pretty soon I'm going to put up access to this virtual parking lot for everybody, not just people in my workshop. So, but ultimately you have to ask a manager, well, why are you doing it in the first place? Are you driving any benefit from it? Is it the kind of problem that Scrum is meant for? Is it a problem that you can't solve on paper up front, which is mostly product development, not entirely, but mostly, and sort of move on from there. All right. Got a couple more here and we can move on. Let's this one's sort of related, so I'm going to go to this one. For projects like interactive voice response, yeah, this is a good one. This just follows on nicely from the last one. For projects like interactive voice response, designing the flow of prompts is a prerequisite to actual development of code. Can Scrum sprint approach still be used? If so, do we do design sprints and development sprints? Part of that super easy to answer, right? There's no such thing as a design sprint. There's no such thing as an only development sprint. Every sprint, there's the whole life cycle happens. That's the purpose of it. It's we're trying to build something that isn't clearly understood, and people's opinions are going to change. Right? It's something we can't solve on paper. So every sprint, we're taking sort of an abstract problem that a person has, and we're trying to solve that problem with whatever technology we use. Interactive voice response, which I have worked in that field a long time ago. I used to work for a company called Polycom, and we did some IVR stuff there. But that's pretty nailed down, right? You figure out what the machine is supposed to say. There's a limited possible number of responses to it, and then it directs you through sort of a decision tree to get you to the right place on your phone system, either to a person or to a recorded message or something else like that. I cannot think of a reason to use Scrum for that kind of problem. That problem is very well defined, and it must be, right? Because machines aren't smart enough yet to really have a wide variety of responses to human speech, right? So it's going to be very limited. So you're going to figure it all out on paper up front, and it's going to work the way that you think it's going to work. So I think that's a perfect example, following on from the last question, of a situation where I would not use Scrum for that. And maybe you'll have trouble convincing your manager, and maybe you won't. I will tell you from experience, when I coach, I do a lot of enterprise coaching now, and when I coach, the vast majority of enterprises that I coach have a good 20 to 30% of their people using Scrum for problems that Scrum isn't meant for. It's meant for problems you can't solve on paper, mostly to satisfy the needs of people who are messy and unreliable, right? If you got machines talking to machines, if you got machines talking to people in a way that isn't highly interactive, if you have something where people aren't involved at all, like some kind of IT project where you're, refreshing hardware or doing data migration or something, I mean, Scrum's just not for that kind of problem. And I blame my own community for sort of overselling it. So there's lots of places where I wouldn't use it. Interactive voice response, I'd have a hard time being convinced that it was. All right. Let's see. Do I have anything else up here that I want to deal with? I think we got them all. We got one more here. Product owner role in sprint planning equals facilitation. Yes. Product owner role in review equals attend. No. I'd say it's also facilitation. I think the product owner needs to facilitate the planning of what's going to get into a product increment in a sprint and help everybody talk about it. And I think they definitely need to facilitate the review. Now, if they're not capable of it, obviously the Scrum Master is going to do that. The guide clearly says that the Scrum Master facilitates all events as needed and requested. But when I'm coaching, I coach my product owners to be able to facilitate both. Now, what's the difference between attending and facilitating? Well, attending, you're sort of a passive participant / observer. Facilitating, you're sort of behind the scenes calling the shots to make sure it goes the way that it needs to go so that you can get the information that you need. A product owner needs to get good and valid feedback on how we've solved a problem so that they know whether it needs to be fixed or what we need to do next, etc. So that's what I would say about that. And I guess that's it for our board. It looks like we've hit them all. So I hope people are finding this useful. The attendance has been hit or miss, but I haven't promoted it a lot. So if you enjoyed this, definitely tell people about it, and I'll be here next Friday doing it again. And look on all of our social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. There's another one. I don't know. I have an employee who does all that, who's much younger than myself, I must say. But we'll throw it all out on all of the social media. I'm gonna give basically everybody in the world access to this parking lot so they can start filling it with questions for Fearless Agility TV. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Happy scrumming.